I want to talk about consumerism as an addiction. I learned back in, I think it was around 2007, that that consumerism is an addiction. I'm going to tell you, how I learned this. Now, to preface this, I come from a poor family. I think, and in my family, I'm actually the only one that ever graduated high school. But we didn't know things like saving money, investing, and we basically lived paycheck to paycheck, and it was just kind of your normal American family thing going on. Nobody in our family's lazy. It's just that we weren't educated enough to to make upper class or middle class at the time. We got married in '81, and we raised kids and spoiled them, and did the old American thing. Back in around 2003, we had got in a lot of debt. Now, when I say a lot of debt, I'm talking, we had like $10,000 or $12,000 in credit card debt. We had auto loans. The sun's in a bad place. And my business was struggling. I went into business in '89, and when you're self-employed and fairly busy, you tend to be able to work your way out of your problems or your financial problems, and for the most part, I just got in a habit of doing that. So, but come 2000, this was after, not long after 9/11, we kind of had a bit of a recession back then, and business slowed, and all of a sudden my bills were starting to kind of overload me. And we weren't the type, we didn't have a whole lot of savings. We did have a little IRA, but it really hadn't built up that much at that time. So I had to make a decision, and we had lived in our house for I don't know, I can't remember when we bought it, but as the way I figured it, we had roughly around $30,000 in equity in it at the time. So what we did was sold our house, and we used that money to pay off the credit card debt and everything. And for a short while, we rented the house from the people that bought our house. They were friends, and they sold that shortly while we were there. So we ended up moving to her sister's for a short period, and then out to my brother's for another short period while we were waiting on a house to be built that we had put a down payment on and was having built in this neighborhood we live now. Now, back in the the 90s, early 90s and on, and talk radio was big, and that's mainly what we played at my shop. And I'd watch, listen to like Rush Limbaugh and others, but noisy little critters. But I was also listening to a guy named Dave Ramsey. And listening to Dave Ramsey was one of the primary reasons why we sold the house, to get out of debt and everything. And but we didn't really, get hard cooked into, the frugal lifestyle or anything right at that moment. But what we did do is get in at least a better habit of how we paid credit cards and stuff like that. But come around 2007, I I kind of had a wake-up moment in 2007 when I had snuck off one day to go play golf, and I needed to get some cash, to go to the golf course, and found out that I only had like $100 in my checking account. And I didn't track it much at the time. I just assumed that I was putting enough money in there to keep up with with everything, and payroll and stuff like that, and scared the crap out of me. So right then it was just like a light went off, and something snapped inside of me that I need to do something about this. So first thing we did was really review a budget and get locked down on it. But one of the things, because we had to spend some time, I had to make some money, and I had to make sure we was building up, getting the bills paid at the time, and luckily the business was doing okay at that time. And this was right before the big housing crash. But we ended up, I had been a member out at this golf course for going on 8 years, and I right then just canceled my membership. I got serious about doing things, getting our finances straightened out and getting on the right path. Noisy dog back there. So how does consumerism come into play here? Well, just like anything, you just want to spend money. It's kind of like a food addiction. You just want to eat, and that's the reason why a lot of people, most of this country's overweight or obese, because they eat too much. And a good sign of being overweight and obese in consumerism is storage buildings being packed to the gills in garages. And this is pretty common knowledge. So there's an issue there. But I learned through going through a strict budget, I learned something about consumerism that's as much of an addiction as it is just something you do. So when we got on this budget, I became very frugal and very much a tightwad. And I started buying my clothes at Goodwill. But one of the things that our Goodwill had was a really good book selection. So what I did was start buying and reading everything about personal finance that I could. And a lot of it's redundant, but it's kind of like just constant motivation to continue doing what you're doing. Probably much like weight loss, learning about stuff like that keeps you on track, can keep things moving for you. So we got real frugal, and I was to the point where I would go through the house turning off lights, and even got to the point where my wife would tell me take out the trash, and I'd smash it down. So we got plenty of room in here for more, save on those bags. Got some squirrels up here. I'll see if I can feed one. Last time I came out here, I could have fed one by hand. I got one eyeballing me here. Here he comes. Here they come. Come on. Come on. I got one here. Come here, buddy. It's okay. It's okay. This may be my only time to feed them, so I got another one. Here you go. Come on. I heard I'm not supposed to be feeding him these things, but we're going to do it anyway. Come on, you can do it. You can do it, little fella. Yeah, you can do it. Come on, it's that simple. Come on. There's plenty more of them out here that probably will, so we'll give them a try. Kind of lost track where I was at, but yeah, I got hardcore on being frugal, and and it's largely what got us to where we are today. As far as being able to retire. Now I'm 64 here in a week or so, a couple of weeks, and we really got on track for saving, and I bought a building, so that has increased our retirement income. But one thing I noticed physically was that once you get really hard into being frugal and on a budget, and and not just spending money on everything every time you turn around, you'll end up, when you do spend money, you'll sit there and it starts going through your head every purchase you make. Should I do this? Do I need to do this? You'll actually get a little nauseated with spending money, and that, to me, I learned right then, is that when you go to an extreme on something, and then you start like weaning back into eating sweets and stuff that you shouldn't, and things like that, well, your body resists it. Somehow mentally you're resisting it. And now, like anything, I overcome that. I went back to spending money and for a while, but after I got into a little more of a controlled situation doing it. But because Amazon came along and Temu, and I had a little phase with Temu, and it's hard to get rid of Amazon. You always try to justify everything, but we at least managed to stay on track while doing it. So I'm going to kind of assume, you have addictions like drugs or alcohol or food, or any of those things you actually ingest, that have, like, when you stop drinking or you stop smoking, you go through this what's the word for it? Whatever it is, kind of like the DTs or whatever they call it. Your body's adjusting from not getting it, because your body's so used to it. The same thing kind of happens with spending money, even though it doesn't go right inside your body. And obviously, to try to get yourself to stop spending money, whether it's on Amazon or Temu or even just walking through the aisles at Walmart, you have to go through that phase where you just lock down. I mean, you don't just slow it down. You have to just say, I'm not buying anything. And if I don't need it, I ain't buying it. And if you've done that for, I'm trying to think how long I went through that phase, and it seemed like it was probably for 3 or 4 to 6 months or something like that, that got me, to the point where the thought of spending money just made me sick. So, and it's really not a bad place to get, you know, for your financial health. At least it got us on a good path, you know, where we were, you know, prioritizing savings, and, you know, was able to build up a retirement fund. So that may be what you need to do, is recognize day-to-day consumerism as another addiction. Get that sun out of there, because that's pretty much what it is. You know, we're too exposed to stuff. You know, it wasn't like this back in the, you know, in the 60s. It would have never probably dawned on me to spend, you know, of course I was a kid back then, so I didn't think, oh, hang on. Yeah, you're just all giddy about getting one. Yeah, you're pretty used to doing that, aren't you? How about you? Anybody else? We got more. We might have another taker coming on. Want some? Want some? Yeah, come on. Yeah, this guy just came right up, didn't you? Because you're a friendly one. Yeah. Come on. There's more. He might make it. I'm gonna call that a record. That's 3 of them today. I've never really tried. It's the first time I've ever really just tried to feed them. You know, I did. We had saw people coming out here with peanuts and feeding them, and so we brought peanuts one day, and sure enough, I got to feed one on a tree, but just did it that one time. But I can tell these squirrels have changed. Some of them are just flat out come right up to you expecting it. So what do you think? Do you think consumerism is an addiction? I mean, one you feel inside your body, not just something you do. You know, oh, I want the latest shoes or purse or fishing rod or, you know, lure, whatever. You know, both men and women have this issue. So, but what do you think? It's hard to pass up things you want, to put that money in the bank and save for the future. But boy, it costs you a lot of money for every dollar you spend now that doesn't get to grow. It's going that thing that you store in a garage is going to end up costing you a ton more money. You know, it just occurred to me that in a lot of cases people combine these addictions. Take food. You know, everybody wants to go out to their favorite restaurant instead of cooking at home, which I admit it's enjoyable to do. But instead of going out and buying something that they're going to put in a storage building, they're just going out and buying something they're going to store around their stomachs. You know, and I think it's called visceral fat. Yeah, you can even combine these problems. If you found this video helpful in any way, or at least worth watching to this point, why don't you hit that like button and subscribe, because I'm going to be doing this a lot more often now that I retired yesterday. So this has become my new thing.